All these parts and Livewell kits can be found directly at our store, TBNation.net, along with anything you need to build a tiny boat. Hey guys, what's going on? This is more or less a seamless showing of how to install the Flow-Rite version 3 Livewell system inside a tiny boat. And this one doesn't have a whole lot of rework or a lot of extra stuff like we had in the other one where it was really hard to follow. This one is just step to finish, from the install to the testing on the boat, to testing it on the water, to putting an actual fish in it, and giving you my final thoughts on the entire system and how it works. And then we'll also be answering questions at the very end on problems and questions that we've gotten through our audience through social media over time about this system as people continue to get them. This entire video has chapters, so you can scroll on your finger on the phone or even on the PC. You should be able to drag your mouse and it'll show you right there. And in the video, it'll tell you exactly how many chapters we have right there in the thumbnail. So you should be able to seamlessly navigate through the entire thing, and we'll also be doing that for all of our videos going forward, and possibly some of the other videos that are lengthy without chapters, because it's a pain without chapters. Stay tuned, here it goes. We are installing this in a Lumicraft V14. Wherever you choose to install this, you'll have to displace the gas tank and the batteries along with the weight of the Livewell. We chose to do it in the back this time. Flow-Rite has a through-hole fitting on the bottom with grooves right there to drain water in between the screen. So water can drain seamlessly through that way, and you can get the very last bit of it out. We are going to be using a plastic tote, a very, very thick, high-density polyethylene tub, the same stuff that kayaks are made out of. But we also sell aluminum Livewell kits on our site that are way better than any plastic tote you can find. Although plastic totes, we've been using them forever, and they will work just as well. You have to install that in a place where it's likely to drain the best. At this point in time, we figure if we can put it in the back to the corner, then you can lean to the back of your boat on a corner, and that will drain most of the water out to that corner. Through the subfloor, make sure you preserve the hole, as we will be running the plumbing underneath the subfloor in this application, although it will vary between boat styles. After the bottom hose is attached to the through-hole fitting, we go ahead and we place it back in the boat, and we will attach the rest of it later. Right now, we're going to rig up the version 3 Livewell valve. What makes this valve unique is that it has a rubber flap in the back that it initiates itself open when the boat is in the water, but when you're on plane, it closes and it just goes back to recirc. So when you have it in auto, it will do either or. It will constantly fill or it will go into recirc. And then when you stop from point to point, then it will just go back to fill. We are installing the actual cable for this. We're going to do some crafty stuff, and every boat is going to be different. Although right here, we're just running it through the subfloor, and this seems to be the best place to install all the through-hole fittings. Try to place all your fittings at the lowest possible part of the boat. Make sure the nut clears the bottom, just the very bottom, and that's right where you want it, as low as possible to get the most pressure from the outside coming in. All these fittings take Flow-Rite's Quick Lock system. It's a very, very quick detachable system that allows you to troubleshoot the entire system at will. So if a pump fails, if a fitting breaks, if anything breaks, it can be very, very easily taken apart and repaired, or just troubleshooted or maintenance at will. To not have this system, you would spend maybe hours trying to just fix one little part on the system. And because we can't afford that, because time is everything in a tournament, we are rigging it so it's fit like this. Right now we're making a specialized bracket right in the middle of here to run the pump. The pump screws directly into the version 3 valve right there. It's preferred that you run it sideways. It'll flow a little bit better, but for this part, we're going to have to keep it right up because of the tight confinement of the boat itself. We are adding gator skins rubber matting on the top and bottom of our DIY little bracket here as a flex cushion, just to help as we tighten the pump down into the valve, and also to help with the flex and vibration of the boat while it's underway and shuttering down the waterway. Once we know our DIY bracket is going to work and fit correctly, we go ahead and we fasten it down. And then we install the pump. We don't want to install it too tight, we don't want to crack it. I mean, after all, it's plastic, and so is the valve. But we go ahead and we use the nut as pressure against to kind of tighten it up against the rubber grommets. We are installing 2 bilge pumps. We're going to go ahead and include this in because I don't talk enough about bilge pumps, so we made special brackets for those. So they'll just sit there inside where they're supposed to be, and they won't move and get jammed up or fall over. I'm using these TH Marine bilge pumps. This one's a manual pump that I'm installing right now, but they have an auto bilge that's actually fairly low key. Doesn't take up a whole lot of space like the normal auto Bilge's will. Plus it'll do manual setup through a switch, plus auto directly to your battery. So I would just get 2 auto bilge pumps and they work just fine. After this, we now know where we can put the main through-hole fitting for the overflow, which has to be a bigger fitting. It's going to be a 1 1/8 fitting, and that's because pressure through the live well pumping in water that fast, and enable for it to equal out, it's going to have to be a 1 1/8 fitting, or your live well will overflow if you try to do a 3/4 overflow drain. It just won't work. We sealed up much the same way we did a 3/4 fitting for the initial inlet of the pump. And then because I didn't have the time, have a better idea of how I was going to make this exact size for a chill mod / cooler, we ended up kind of fabricating one to do the job for us. Later on, we started making all of these. We make live wells that have creases in the middle to fold all the water right to the drain, and we also have chill box mods in any shape and size needed. And this is a full kit. This is what we are using to build the entire boat, so we're going to take a little bit of it out right now to start framing in the live well from scratch. To see more on this process, check out the actual series for this boat, or really any framing video from us in general. This is all 1/16 aluminum if you're wondering. It's the lightest way that we can frame the boat without the aluminum being too thin for any real integral strength. And we don't weld, we rivet, because there's no real gain you get from welding 1/16 inch aluminum. There just isn't. There's just not enough stuff there, so you can't actually grind it flat. You'd have to actually leave the weld bead, and that's just not going to work for how we overlay and stick everything together. So it's way easier to rivet it, and then we actually sell printed and extruded pieces now, like for full systems like this. So you don't have to do any kind of DIY makeshift boxes like this that was actually really stressful to make that box. I hated that thing. We are coiling the tube inside the chill box to create enough usable water to run through the tube while ice in it to chill the water ever so slightly to keep your fish a little bit more healthy while they're in the live well. And we're right now installing the Flow-Rite Aerator pump out nozzle, which will both aerate and recirc or pump out all the water out of your live well with just the pull of the nozzle itself. It takes 2 of these sections plus 1 that goes all the way out in the bilge, which is the last section there. We're also installing a Marine Oxygenator, something we generally don't do, but because we want this live well to have the absolute edge for tournament performance, we are installing one, which only adds to the oxygenating part, which one of the bigger things in the live well is constantly having a sufficient amount of oxygen inside the live well as the water heats up. Water that is warmer holds less oxygen, so in between the cooling and the flooding and making sure there's enough sufficiently to keep the fish alive, it's a big deal. So we're doing everything we possibly can to include other things we'll talk about in a minute. Now that that's installed, one of the last things we have to install is the top drain out. This is the other 1 1/8 inch fitting that we installed the other fitting all the way down in there earlier. Now we get to connect the 1 1/8 inch hose on the quick connects. We ran this as high as we possibly could, thinking we would have the advantage and the most water filled into the tank. But later on, when we were all in the front of the boat fishing, the boat leaned forward and you started to get water kind of coming really, really close to the very, very top because it was slanted and it wasn't going out the drain. So keep that in mind. Sometimes running it that high doesn't give you an advantage depending on how your boat is. So, it's just an educated decision. But it does work standardly, and especially when the boat is level, or especially when you're in back, it works fantastic. So here it is working, here it is running. It is filling up right there, and there it is on recirc. So it's actively cycling water from the drain into the pump and then right back out. When you switch the valve into empty, it just makes it so the water goes right from the drain, right outside of the boat through the fitting itself. And we also installed the screen drain there. We can't show you what it's like in auto until we're on the water, which is shortly to come. But obviously when you turn it right back to recirc, it goes and it does its same thing again. The aerator pump out nozzle is pushed all the way in, and that allows it to recirc. But if you pull it all the way out, like so, then it starts to go out the bilge. We have 3 fittings. I really like that whole thing, how I fixed that. I always like to see the water leaving the boat, so there's no question that the pump's actually working. And that just runs for the manual auto and the live well pumps, all of those fittings. The only thing I didn't show you was how to install the live well timer and rocker switch into the setup. I just don't know where the film went, but I do have the initial video that shows you exactly how to do it, and it's up here in the iCards and the description, so go ahead and check it out right there on the timestamps. But let's get this thing on the water and show you what it can do. This was the last boat that I installed this kit on. This was the last boat that I ever did for any individual before I solely took a pledge to create for the audience alone. So I was blessed this day to kind of go out and test the boat myself before the owner came down, and I stuck a fairly nice fish. And it was like perfect. What a perfect fish to kind of stick in the live well. Kind of a slow day other than that. Caught a few striper. Tried to go here and there. The lake was all kind of weird in a flux. But, you know, we tested it out. We stuck the fish in there. We put it on its modes. We drove around. We drove on plane. Then we pulled off. Stopped. Drove on plane. Pulled off. Stopped. And we were checking to see if, you know, the pump was doing its job. If the valve was doing its job. All of it seemed to be okay. And the fish seemed to be very much alive and healthy and sassy when we went to pull it out. So there it is, right from the start of the project to the fish in hand getting released. My final opinion on this thing, it is fantastic, set and forget it, and that's coming from somebody who's built a lot of live wells the old traditional way with 2 pumps and a Y-gate and a bunch of switches and a bunch of BS, all the way to this system with just 1 pump and 1 switch and a fantastic timer and set and forget it. Now let's move on to the questions. If you have any, here are some of the most frequently asked questions. Biggest question I get, hands down, is when is my kit gonna come to me? So just so you know, like, we have no control over when it comes from, you know, the China ports all the way to us, but once it does, Flow-Rite and us, we are very, very serious about getting those orders out. You know, we don't like to keep you waiting. We don't like it waiting. It jams up everybody. You know, we can't even complete the order until it's sent. Otherwise we'd have to, like, you know, it's just a constant funding hold, you know, and chaos until we're able to fill those orders and send them. So we try to send them as soon as possible, and so does Flow-Rite. So just know that once we have them, nobody sits on it. But they are in higher demand because of what they can do and because of their popularity. So, you know, order one as soon as you possibly can if you do want one. You know, we sell them on our site because it does sometimes take 2 to 3 weeks. And although when it's here, the turnaround time is just generally a week. People generally get it in a week or so. So it's just when it's here and when it's not, you know, it's containers full of parts coming in and out. Second question I get is, you know, what's the difference between the kits? So the starter kit gives you the valve and just gives you the basic parts. So pretty much you can go to Lowe's or Home Depot and just get the plumbing hose, like the braided plumbing hose there, the clear hose. I wouldn't get the clear hose, I would get the braided hose. The clear hose kinks. And you can also just get the pipe clamps, the screw-on pipe clamps, and you can just do it that way. It's not nearly as elegant, obviously, in that you lose the quick lock system, but it's a lot more for the quick lock system and those hoses. So if you just need the basic parts of the kit, the basic meat and potatoes, the starter kit is very, very good. And obviously the premium kit just has everything, minus the Marine Oxygenator. You'd have to buy that separate. Other things you might want to consider is Marine G-Juice. That stuff works fantastic inside the live well in terms of calming the fish, eliminating stuff in the water that might stress the fish out or cause the fish harm and eventually cause it to die, costing the fish its life and you a lot of money. Next question is about the chill box. You know, is the chill box really necessary? I would say in some cases, depending on the temperature and where you're fishing, yeah, a lot of people bring back dead fish, especially in the summer when they're frog fishing and they fry the fish, but there's other ways to kind of avoid that. You can get the VT2 systems, the vents. You can actually even make your own DIY vents that help yourself out like that as well. But vents on top of the live well work really well. We like to use those in tandem. I didn't show you on that system, but we did have the VT2 vent systems right there in that live well to boot. I definitely would recommend those in tandem with any live well kit, no matter what it is, basic to advanced. And there are also studies that if you pour a little ice in there, you have to have a thermometer in there, but if you put a little bit of ice, and we're talking a little bit, not like a whole thing, you know, it will actually, but you have your live well filled, meaning you have to have it filled and you have to have it cooled to a certain temperature already. And you put the ice in there, you know, it's already ready for you to drop in the fish. Like, you can't just, you know, wait till you catch a fish because you get the extra speed, you know, and plane ability and whole shot because you don't have a full live well. You're gonna have to just put up with the live well in there, circulating and being ready to dump the fish right in there versus filling it once you catch a fish. So if you prep the water with ice and you make sure it's in a certain degree temperature, you know, only a few degrees lower than what the parent temperature is. And I think water holds the best oxygen under 70 degrees. So you would try to keep it around that. But obviously if your water is 80 or 90 degrees, like sometimes it is over here in Lake Havasu, you can't have 60-degree water, you'll shock the fish. So you have to put it with a reasonable margin of error. But if you have, just remember, the colder the water is, the more oxygen it holds, which is why some species that are really oxygen dependent really tailor to colder water in certain seasons. Let's say smallmouth. Smallmouth need more more oxygen, you know, in their body per capita versus largemouth. That's a fact. So that's why you find them always cleaning the colder. Like when it's hotter out there, the bass will still be up there in the shallows, and then the smallies almost always be down when the water kind of flips upside down with the seasons, especially out here where I'm at Havasu, that happens. So you got to keep that in mind. That being said, a chill box would work. The only thing with the chill box, if you don't run your pipes, I mean, you don't coil your tubing correctly, and the water stays in there, you know, then it freezes later, you have to wonder about that, whether or not that's a great thing. So maybe at that point in time, something I didn't include here was a Y-gate, which would allow you to bypass the chill box and just run it completely into the live well, because you could add an additional Y-gate. You can get a Y-gate from the hardware store. We used to run Y-gates initially to run the entire thing. We wanted to switch it either from the live well or, you know, direct it out to the Thru-hull fitting and out of the boat. So we used to use that, but you can just install a Y-gate fitting in there, and you can either bypass the chill mod or bypass the box if you're having problems with it. But that, you know, and there's times where why would you want to keep running it through the chill box? It's actually a lot more pressure to run it through that much extended hoses versus running it through a quick short push in. And that's something that we'll be carrying on in our other live well kits, but that's just something you can pick up for like $5-10 at the hardware store, no problem. Question 3, do we have a cheaper kit? You know, this is all nice, the version 3 kit, but aren't there like cheaper kits out there that will just give me pretty good results? And the answer is yes, we actually have a very, very mainstream kit that will keep your fish alive and just pretty much do what all live wells did before, which is just fill and then eventually drain back out, which is what this one does, aside from the fact that, you know, the version 3 has that valve that activates when you go on plane. You don't have to remember to shut your live well off, so that way when you get off plane, you come back, you like have a bunch of dead fish because your live well drained out. So you have to be cautious of that, because that could happen. The whole thing with this kit is it's got a stem pipe. So it's a pipe that sticks out from the bottom of the live well into the drain, and then water just constantly, once it reaches the top of the pipe, it just funnels back into the pipe, and it goes out to the 1 1/8 drain fitting, and then out to the bilge. So you're constantly getting water pushed in there from the outside, and then it just goes up and out. And then for a minute when you would be on plane, obviously you wouldn't be sucking water from there. You'd have to turn off your aerator pump, and then you would just have the fish in there. So that's the disadvantage of that. It doesn't have a recirc function, or you could add an additional pump to that to have a recirc function, but then you're adding more switches, but you could do it. And it does work. And people install in coolers, people install it in traditional live wells, people use this as an upgrade. It is a very, very cheap kit. It's only got a few basic parts, you know, the stem pipe, a pump, a nozzle, and some hose, and that's it. So that is a lot cheaper than, say, what we give you here with all the quick connects and all that stuff. If you're doing small lakes where you're just going from here to there and you're only doing 5, 10, 15-minute runs from point to point versus hours on big lakes, then it's really no big deal at all. Next question, I get a lot of complaints about how the system doesn't work for some applications. And for instance, one of the applications, I got a complaint from a gentleman who was trying to use it for a gigantic catfish live well that held, I think, 100+ gallons of water inside of it. And he said he could only get it only up to like maybe halfway full, or not even that, before the system would start backing out of the valve. The valve would not be able to hold the water, and it would just start bleeding out of the valve. So for that answer, the version 3 live well valve is only one version. There's 4 versions, and I would say if you're trying to run a scenario like that, their version 3 valve is not for that kind of live well. They have anything from a version 1, which is the most basic, and we'll be showing that to you in the John Yak. I run a version 1 live well valve in there. We'll be talking about why, but it's really just an open and close on a remote. So you can open and close it on a remote. That's all it. Open, close. That's it. So once it's open, that's it. And on a live well that big, you'd honestly want to run the biggest pump you can, an 800, preferably an 1100. Trying to run a 500 GPH pump at a 100-gallon live well, I think will take forever to fill up, forever. But specifically for the drain down there, you can definitely run a version 1 drain for a catfish live well that big, and it'll just open and close and it'll hold it, and that's it. It won't back out until you open the drain on the remote. Another thing is they have, you know, the version 2 and they have the version 4. I'm not quite sure what the version 2 is, but the version 4 is built for high pressure, where it doesn't have the auto feature, but it has different features in it, very, very similar, to where you can, it handles more water pressure going up. So you have a really tall boat, you're pulling a lot of water from the bottom, but it's going towards the front of your boat, because you have your live wells or your bait wells in the front of your boat and the water's traveling up. The version 3 also doesn't do great for that, but the version 4 does, and maybe even the version 2 does, in terms of pushing it up. It's the auto feature that I think that might be messing with you guys there. The auto feature really is meant for like the live wells being right there. The live wells are generally right there in the back with the bass boats, and then kind of, you know, the same thing with the tiny boats, unless you're trying to run it, you know, in the center 50, even then it's still not that far. And the live wells are not so big that they're gonna, you know, overwhelm the valve. But that's a thing. We're going to be experimenting with these different kits and these different valves as we go on to make bigger and better things. We're going to try and diversify the types of boats that we do instead of just bass boats. So you'll be seeing some of those come through here pretty soon. I think that's like the most frequently asked questions I get. So if you have any, drop it down in the comment section below and we'll answer them freely there. Please give us a like and a subscribe and a share. That helps this video trend. And hopefully it'll help surpass the other video, which is going to be really hard to surpass because it's been on top for a while. So help this video get on top of that one and be the first one people see versus the other one where I had to do all the rework. Try and make this system be the first thing you install on your boat before you get really heavily into framing, because the farther you get into framing, the more chances you have of running into a big problem and having to do rework on either the framing or the live well system itself, and it's not fun. So take care. I hope this helps you with all your problems. I will catch you guys later.